Scott gets here. But I'd like to shuffle the deck a little bit and start in a little bit out of order. I don't believe we have any public comment, but I just wanted to call everybody's attention to Ernest Hooper's article in the paper today where he talked about CEO Egan's departure due to poor funding for transit. And also on the front page of the newspaper, there's a picture of an autonomous vehicle that Tampa's going to be using. We're going to be doing something similar, but we got to get in front of the newspaper. So we'll work on that. I'm going to start with number 4 today because I want to make sure we get through that before I have to leave, and then we'll go back and do 3B and 3C. Are there any corrections or additions, modifications to the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's start off with number 4, consolidation of bus purchase savings. And we can talk about that because I think that's really critical.
Yeah. Okay, good morning. I'll go ahead and kick this off and then pass it to Debbie to kind of walk through the several options that are in your packet for suggested ways on which we might utilize the $2.6 million in savings that we thankfully identified by consolidating 2 years of bus purchases into 1 year and saving that cost escalation funding worked out to be about $2.6 million. But unfortunately, I'm sorry that Commissioner Scott and Eggers are not here, but I put together just a couple of points for this committee to just better understand of the changes that we have made for those of you, which is I think Commissioner Barkley and Johnson, who've been on this committee for several years now and have identified a change in the recommendations coming from PSTA staff and where we're going on this bus purchase. So, as Commissioner Barkley said, what I suggested to him, since he has to leave, is that this is an informational item as shown on your agenda. You could make a recommendation and if you'd like to, and make a recommendation to the board to vote on this coming meeting, or not. It's okay. So those of you who were here in August of 2015 on the PSTA board might recall, maybe not fondly, that there was a lot of debate even back then about the type of buses that PSTA should buy. And my recommendation in August 2015 to this committee was to buy diesel buses. Made that recommendation. The board ultimately did not take that recommendation and voted to buy hybrid electric buses instead. About that same time, we wrote a letter to, we identified a future shortfall in our combined operating and capital budgets out, I believe back then it was in 2018 or 2019 that we were going to have a shortfall when you combine the operating and capital budgets, assuming that we were going to need to replace all the buses at after 12 years of useful life. That's what PSTA and the federal government has basically as their rule of thumb. Buses last 12 years. Good morning. Buses last 12 years, and we had done a computation back in 2015 that if PSTA was going to stay on track to replace all of its buses within 12 years, and then how much that would cost, and how much our operating and capital expenditures combined, we were going to go over the quote-unquote fiscal cliff sometime in 2018 or 2019. Fast forward to today, and I recommended last month, and PSTA staff is recommending us continue to purchase hybrid electric buses, and in the future, probably all electric battery powered vehicles. And just why has that change occurred? Just a trip down memory lane a little bit again. Yes, right around August, we then sent a letter. The PSTA board voted to write a letter after we identified that there was going to be a shortfall. We identified that it was going to be an $8 million a year shortfall, and the board approved us requesting STP funds from the Pinellas MPO, which it was called at the time, and that did not go over favorably. That the MPO has never approved of using of STP funds, and indicated that they wouldn't be interested in using of funds to supplement PSTA bus replacements. Three main things have changed since August of 2015. Number one is the PSTA staff thankfully responded to the concerns that we identified in showing this future fiscal cliff or shortfall in that a 12-year useful life buses would not be able to replace in time with the funds that we had available. And Henry Lukasik and his maintenance staff came up with the idea of a repowering program to replace the engines and transmissions and batteries in the fleet that we had around their halfway through their life, to extend the use of those buses so they could run longer than 12 years. Now, this is not the full rebuild that I think Commissioner Scott talked about last board meeting, or a complete overhaul of the bus. It's actually something that doesn't cost nearly as much as he estimated. These, in addition to starting to replace the engines and transmissions in the buses, Henry and his team did a great job, an amazing job of really kind of engineering a new solution to repowering the hybrid fleet. Those of you who were on the board back then might remember that we did a procurement for brand new batteries and hybrid components, and it went to this finance committee, and then it went to the board to approve. And then our former representative from the beach, Mark Dighton, you might remember, he did the calculations, I think, right there on the dais, and said 200 times the cost of these brand new batteries and computers that run the battery system. Oh my gosh, that's going to be like an $8 million problem. I searched on Friday for when that exactly occurred, but it was shortly after August of 2015. And luckily, Henry and his staff also said, oh my gosh, that's going to be an $8 million problem. And they went to work and they figured out a way that we're not replacing the batteries, especially the computer system, but we're refurbishing the ones that are there. They have figured out a way, and there's very few transit maintenance managers across the United States that have done what they did, figured out a way that they can refurbish at a much lower cost the components that are on the bus now, rather than replace them at that very expensive cost. So we haven't used that contract that the board approved back then. And that's brought the cost down for this refurbishment program to 8 cents a mile and 5 cents a mile over the life of the bus, something that's very economical, and we can that was included in the overall cost per mile. So that's the first thing that changed. That has completely changed from 2015 to 2017. We're now running the buses much longer than 12 years, and we have the ability to, at a low cost, because of this low-cost repowering program. Number two is the maintenance program overall, partly because of this repowering program, also for other reasons, has dramatically improved in the last 2 years. We're now more than 2 times more reliable. The fleet, as I presented back in 2015, as we presented, we were worried that buses, as they got older, would become less reliable. Well, that just hasn't been the case. The great work of the maintenance department has made the buses more reliable, even as they might get older. And number three, and we sort of presented this a little bit to the Finance Committee last month, we're now employing what we believe is actually a more conservative method of budgeting and developing the budget for PSTA by separating the operating budget from the capital budget. The reason that we believe we should do that is the capital budget is mostly funded by grants, federal and state grants, and other sources of one-time funding, like our capital reserve, funds that have been saved over time, that are one-time sources of funds, and then put into the capital reserve. The operating budget is funded by the property tax, by fare box, and by ongoing state grants that are recurring every year. And the operating expenses, almost all operating expenses are recurring expenses. 60-some% is labor and fringe, bus drivers and mechanics cost every single year. And at least we now take the position that one-time reserves or one-time capital funds should not be used to prop up those ongoing operating expenses, because ultimately those revenues are going to run out, and then we won't be able to keep funding the bus drivers and mechanics as the service keeps going. So now Debbie is very focused on identifying the lowest possible operating cost and ways that we can save funds, because our operating revenues are relatively flat and not within, most of the revenues we receive, operating revenues, are not within our control. The property tax, luckily, with the economy going pretty well right now, has been going up. That's been a benefit. But our fare box is only somewhat within our control. As we talked to the board last month about, we have some ability, but most of the day-to-day fluctuations in fare box we don't really have any control over. We don't have much control over what goes on in Washington and Tallahassee, but we're trying our best. But most of the revenues that on the operating side are outside of our control, so the thing we can control is the expenses. That's why we're recommending hybrid buses now in November of 2017, and these are the three other changes that have occurred for those of you who are on the board just in the last 2 years. That's what leads me to make this recommendation today. Now finally, Commissioner Eggers raised a good question last committee meeting, that we tried to dig into a little bit. Just if you're looking at what is the most environmentally friendly decision that the board can make, is it more environmentally beneficial in a holistic way to replace the oldest diesel buses in our fleets? Those are like 2001, 2002 vintage. Those diesel buses, get those off the road faster by purchasing new, cleaner diesel buses, because there's new emissions regulations, so the newer buses are not as polluting as the older buses. And since they cost less, we could replace the older buses faster with new diesel buses. Or is it more environmentally friendly to replace the older diesel buses at a somewhat slower pace with the hybrid electrics? I've included the spreadsheet in your packet, but the answer is fairly dramatic. The answer is, it is more environmentally beneficial overall because of the lower fuel usage of the hybrids to stick with this hybrid electric approach. It works out to be about 1,500 tons better of CO2 equivalent, which is sort of a method of equating all pollution in one one number. By following the hybrid electric program through 2019, computed up until 2019, if we would keep buying hybrids versus buy diesels and replace old diesels, it's a net benefit to go with the hybrid strategy by 1,500 tons. So I thought that was a good question that I personally wanted to know the answer to too. So that brings us to today's discussion, and I'm going to pass the baton to Debbie to talk about, again, the recommendations that are in your packet, and these are, I just copied them again. She's going to walk through these different options. Again, we don't have to make a decision at this meeting necessarily, but ultimately we're going to make a recommendation and go to the board with a strategy on how to use these $2.6 million.
This is the last slide, though.
Yeah, this is the last
Okay.
slide.
Brad?
Yeah.
Do you mind if we back up for a second? Just a couple questions on the prior slide. So,
Okay.
The first one on just, well, okay, we'll start with that slide. The cost per actual mile, is that over the extended lifetime of the buses? It's not the original 12 years, it's 15 years that it's
Yeah.
calculated out over?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next question was actually on the next slide. As far as the hybrid replacement program, is the emissions that you're showing there as the final answer, the 1,553 tons, is that for the entire fleet or just for doing the
entire
hybrid
fleet.
versus? Okay, so what is, so the question for me is, what is the difference between just the hybrid, the hybrids that may be purchased versus the diesels, right? Not, I mean, obviously the fleet still has a.
Oh, just one, you're talking about just one?
Well, so to Commissioner Egger's point, if we're retiring 3 buses of the old style diesel and replacing them with something new, whether it be 3 diesels, hybrids, whatever, you know, what is the comparison there versus the total fleet emissions?
So the way we computed we took our whole fleet, and that whole fleet has emissions from 200 buses from 2001 to 2016. Then we computed, we had 2 scenarios, 2017, 18, and 19. If we could buy, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but say 50 diesel buses and replace the 50 oldest ones back here, or we could replace 40, we could buy 40 hybrids in 2017, 18, in the future, and only replace the 40 oldest ones. Run those 2 scenarios out, run the emissions for those 2 scenarios out, and the net benefit was 1,500 tons for the one that only replaced fewer, but they were hybrid.
Okay.
They were new hybrids versus new diesel.
And that emission savings was only through 2019? Or is that,
Right.
is that for the life
Right.
of the buses?
That would be for the life of the
So it's
buses.
the purchases through 2019 or the replacements through
Yes.
2019?
Computed
then
over
carried
the life
forward
of the
for
buses.
12 or 15 years?
It was 600,000 miles, which,
That's
based on
12
the
years.
mileage, which is somewhere between 12 and 15 on average.
Okay, but, okay.
600, I mean, our buses have been, Henry, according to what Henry's numbers show, we've been retiring them really closer to 800,000, but we assumed 600,000.
Well, and that makes sense, and I said 12 years because the estimates and the assumptions were 50,000 miles per year.
Yeah.
Another, just, and I need to spend more time with, and hopefully have some questions answered about the spreadsheet. But is there a reason why the electric bus is estimated at 70,000 miles per year versus the other? Okay, because the other 2, the hybrid and the diesel, are at 50,000. I wasn't sure if there was a reason why the.
I don't know, maybe that was left over from our earlier analysis or something.
Is that in the current?
Yeah, oops, I just lost it. It's in the spreadsheet, and I'm assuming I'm reading it right, but there's 50, 57. I wasn't sure if it was looking at the proposed bus routes for the electric and saying that there's more travel or whatnot. It won't make that big of a difference between in calculating because it doesn't have the same emissions.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
And again, not just looking at the numbers and trying to understand how all these different numbers came together.
I don't think that, well, yeah,
Well, you could put 300,000 in there. It shouldn't make a difference if it.
that wouldn't make any difference in the
zero.
net.
Right.
Yeah, because they're in both scenarios. Those two BYDs, we've already bought.
Right, I just wasn't sure if there was a rationale behind it that I was missing, so.
Okay.
Typos are good, it's good rationale too.
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, appreciate the time. I'm going to obviously have to look at this a little bit closer. Going back one slide, at the bottom, you talked about operating revenues and having no control over them. And I really thought that kind of the conversation that we were having about looking at that pilot, if you want to call it, that we did in June of lowering the price in half seemed to elevate the numbers a little bit. And so I would really, again, I don't know where we're going with that, but I would really like to look at that more closely. As we proceed down the road, it seems to me that we're going to be having a premium bus service, and you started even addressing that a little bit by showing certain bus services haven't gone down, actually gone up a little bit. There's one area that's really gone down.
Yeah.
And that's probably more in that area that's price sensitive, where you could almost look at it like a commodity product. And I think that's an area that we ought to explore more, because I do think there was some seemingly decent results. At least that's what you were telling us about.
Yeah, I agree.
And find that price point that makes sense for our residents in our county at this time. And that could change over time, but right now, that's what you have. You have what you have, and I think that's what we ought to embrace. And then we can change that as we go forward. That's different than the premiums service that we
Right.
look at going down the road. So also just I'm sure there are some, the new hybrid versus the old hybrid differences on, not only on gas, but emissions. And it's not a question, it's just a statement. The new ones that we're buying, where you get to use the battery more and not as much the other. Yeah, the
True.
in series or parallel, whatever. I forget the name of it.
Right, that is another change since 2015.
Yeah, and the original numbers, you went back and showed a little history. In the original numbers, the number of buses that we were buying was much more dramatic. If you remember, there was a lot of buses we were buying, and now because of this various programs, we're cutting back on the number of buses that we're buying over that.
Yeah.
It's kind of survival, really. I mean, you did a lot of things operationally to help survive, and we cut back on the number of purchases. Don't have the money.
Right.
So you have to do that. So,
Right.
I mean, I think that those are all great things that we've been working on. I think that's what we should be doing. That's what we're supposed to be doing, not only for our riders. I'm really curious about this reliability that's just turned on a dime. It was really a big problem in 14, and then it's like great. And that's what our riders need, is reliable buses. I'm not sure the riders care as much about the environmental part, is more reliability and more buses, but I don't know that. I'm just throwing it out there. And I do think that number of buses has a big, when you do these calculations, and it'll be interesting to go through this myself, incrementally, when you have more buses that you're replacing with bad ones versus the fewer, that now we're not replacing that many bad ones. We're just not.
Right.
As it
Not as
relates to
many.
the environmental, question on the total tonnage. So anyway, good work. Appreciate the presentation.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah, I'm trying to drive down to the 1553, and this is my audit background coming in. And I see that number on the spreadsheet, and it looks like it's a comparison between 18 hybrids and 24 diesels. But I don't see which per bus. It looks like it's 1548 versus 1722. Is that the metric tons that we're comparing?
I can take a look at it, perhaps,
Because
I mean, the net difference when you keep the rest of the fleet constant is basically the number of new hybrids compared to the new diesels, right?
So it's a comparison of forward hybrids or forward diesels.
But I believe, and maybe the note that the documentation is not properly labeled, but the attempt at least was to net out and look at the true apples-to-apples comparison of the entire fleet. So when you buy 24 buses in the future, that means you can replace 24 old buses. And then if you buy 18 hybrids, you can replace 18 old hybrids. That means you still have 6 quote-unquote old diesels from the olden days left as a net difference.
Yeah. Because it looks, I mean, just looking at the diesel, 2017 diesel is 138 tons per bus per year. But going back to the old diesels, 2003, 2005 were 85 and 112. So that those diesels are emitting less CO2 than the new diesels.
I believe on that spreadsheet, the quantity of vehicles of that vintage isn't the quantity.
It's the quantity is the bottom line, but the one line above that says per bus per year. So
We can take a look at it.
yeah,
I mean, I know that kind of confused me of that spreadsheet in the past was the quantity, yeah. Because it's based on the total miles, and if we have, 30, what do we have, 30, 40 some 2006s, that's gonna have a lot more emissions because there's just so many more of them.
well, I'd like to go through that.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. One of the things you just pointed out is in the last couple years, we've already seen changes in the hybrid technology. And those who will be staying for the planning committee today, or you will hear at the board meeting, is that we are being sought after by different agencies or companies to be part of national studies on autonomous vehicles. And I'm actually saying it as a fact more than a question. We'll set aside $50,000 of the savings to be able to participate in these studies if needed. Because I think it's going to be very good to see how the implementation will be used here in Pinellas County with other shared vehicles. And the next thing on the list is a facility infrastructure to support electric vehicles. Back when this building was built back in 2005, the concept of having an electric fleet just wasn't in anybody's radar screen. And so what we need to do, and we already have on board, is a consultant, an engineering consultant, to take a look and what do we need to do to get ready for the future of electric buses here. We have the infrastructure to be able to handle the buses, 2 buses that we've ordered and the 2 in the Low-No grant that we've been awarded. But how can we handle beyond that here and get ready for that? We already had in the 5-year plan, but out of ways, about $3 million set aside for this. And the engineer is going to come back with a better estimate than what we have. And what I did is I just sort of brought it forward and we'd have savings on that. So that, I think, is an important piece to consider as we look forward to the electric technology, which, of course, autonomous vehicles are also running on electric as well. We could also take a look and order an additional 3 electric buses. And then we would just maybe stagger the replacement of those to be able to handle the infrastructure. Number 4 is what we've been talking about for the last 10 years. We've been ordering hybrid electric buses and improving with the technology that comes across. We could place another order today for an additional 3 hybrid electric buses to add to our fleet. And by doing so, we will have taken out all the old diesels from except 2005. We'll still have diesels for, I believe it's 2006, 7, and 8. But we'll be getting rid of our oldest ones, which is, I think, the goal that we're trying to get to. And lastly, we can just do nothing at this point and kind of see what evolves over the course of the future with these budgetary savings. So these are things for you to think about, and if you want to, you can make it an action item for the board meeting.
What is the projected amount again for the savings?
It's about $2.6 million of budgetary savings.
Okay, so we could do basically 2, 3, 4, 5, but not all of them.
Correct.
Right.
So we've got a little buffet menu for you here.
Mhm.
Right, we would definitely recommend that we at least hold back $50,000 for number 1.
Right.
Under any scenario,
Mhm.
Given these opportunities we have coming up
Mhm.
with autonomous vehicles. And then basically pick one of the strategies, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
So, with the 3 electric bus replacements, would those run on the route that the new electric buses are going to be running on, or are we talking about a different route? I asked because there was infrastructure needed for the electric route with the in charger. Yeah, and so I don't know if those aren't running on the same route or needed on the same route, if we're going to be able to use them as efficiently.
Yeah. Oh, we have I think it's a 5-phase rollout plan that goes up to 20-some electric. If we get the VW settlement funds or something other, and we ramp up to 20-some electric vehicles, how would we deploy them? And they would not all be on the same route, but they would take advantage of the first en route charger down there at USF in St. Petersburg, where the first one's going to be. Then over time, we would do a second one right here at PSTA, right over here at we call the lay-by. So that, and then there's like the Route 11 that we've targeted, and then a route over in Clearwater.
So if we went with 3 electric buses, we'd have additional capital needs for charging for en route charging elsewhere. If we did it today,
Perhaps.
right? I mean, it's in the plans
Yes.
for down the road, but it's not laid out for today.
Right.
Okay.
We're actually sort of in a little timing phase with the electric technology. There are some, as Commissioner Scott announced a couple of meetings ago, the batteries have improved further, and there's the potential that we will not have to purchase another en route charger. That I think in the next 2 years, the batteries will be good enough that they can just be charged at night. That they can run these, maybe not 100% of PSA's routes, but a large majority of our routes with their span, how long the batteries can last.
So doesn't that make the case to not necessarily move forward with either 2 or 3? You know, the facility infrastructure would seem that also may be progressing at a greater pace, where technology is moving faster, and if the battery capacity is also getting better, then it makes sense it would make sense to delay.
Number 2, I would maybe disagree a little bit.
And that's why I'm
maybe
asking.
agree.
I haven't studied the infrastructure.
I would agree with
plan.
number 3. Number 3 may not make, maybe too early. I mean, where are we? We have purchased 2 electric vehicles. We're going to be coming to the board with our Lono grant award and purchasing 2 more, so we'll have 4. We'll have 4 in the fleet. If we went ahead with number 3, that would make 7. Some of
we don't know exactly, but somewhere between 4 and 7, we are hitting the max of what this building, built in 2005, can handle with its relatively meager electrical output power can handle for overnight charging. In the future, when that parking lot out there is filled with electric vehicles, we're going to need a lot more power to that facility, basically because it's replacing the diesel fuel tanks. It is the fuel for the transit system. So we've had a lot of discussions with Duke Energy, and I'm still very hopeful that Duke Energy will pay quite a bit of the upgrade to this facility, because that's what they do with industrial places around the state. Is they put some of the capital money up front for a new business. It's going to be that they're going to be charging a lot of money over the years for electrical service, and so they're very excited to have us have an electrical fleet that they can charge us for running. They have grants that they've talked about, grants or loans for capital infrastructure for electrical upgrades, which is what this would be, to the building to get more power here to charge more buses overnight than we have the capacity to do now. We can do the 4 that are almost on order, but somewhere between 4 and 7, we're going to be running into the max, and we'll need to do number 2 at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, yeah, Richard Jones?
The number 2, is that to bring power into the facility, or is that to create the things that plug into the buses? Because the plugging into the buses may change as the bus technology changes.
It's all encompassing, all of what you just said.
But it's more, I would describe it in your words, it's more of the first thing you said. It is upgrading the
lines coming
infrastructure, the lines, or the ability for PSTA to have more power regardless of the plug technology.
So, does staff have a recommendation of which of these alternatives, using today's knowledge, would be your recommendation? Well, I just heard you say probably not number 3, but
Right.
there's several. I'm totally in agreement on doing 1, setting that aside so we can play. But so 2 or 4 or 5.
I guess, and I haven't had a lot of discussions with Henry or Debbie on this, is my recommendations would be a combination of number 1, 2, and 4. That right now we have an engineer trying to better quantify the total cost of number 2, get us a better estimate on number 2. And then I would like to explore what grants or loan options Duke Energy might be able to lower that number. I think it can be lower. The net cost to PSTA can be lower for number 2 than $2.7 million. So then I think there would be some funds left over to buy another bus or 2.
So what I'm hearing you say is that rather than make a recommendation for the board to go and commit to one of these options, it won't hurt us to wait a month or 2 until we get the engineering's quantification.
Yeah, I mean, it does hurt us because the bus price goes up. But I think, I need to hear what my staff think a little bit more, but that would probably be where I stand right now, is keep some money for number 2 and then use the balance of it for buses, for hybrid buses.
So let me look at alternative 4 a little deeper.
Mhm.
Do we know that we're going to be buying more hybrid electric buses in any case?
We have in the 5-year plan, hybrid electric buses going out with more electric buses starting in 2020. By then, our pilot will be over. I think by then, we will have the study done, we'll know where we're going, et cetera. And to Brad's point, we can start working on the infrastructure to be ready for earlier, perhaps. So we do know that we will be buying hybrid buses. We can just save money by placing an order today. I feel like I'm on an infomercial. If we buy today, you get 1995.
All right.
And if you buy them today, can we buy them at the discounted price?
Yes. And I'll say yes, but I think Henry would have to ask again to see if the price has changed from when we're placing the order for the other buses. We have seen, it's been going up to about, last time Henry and I looked, it was about 5.6% increase in the cost of buses. And so, I mean, we know we'd have at least that savings. And then also with the consortium contract ending in December of 18, so long as we place the order of buses with Gillig before December 31st of 18, we know we'll be at least getting those prices. We have no idea where the prices will go after that with the consortium.
Do we have a idea how many routes would be precluded from really using electric? Do we have some longer routes, some more hilly routes, tenuous routes, something that would tell us how many routes where electric buses are not projected to be feasible down the line?
Well, believe I haven't been on every road in Pinellas County, but I don't think we have any hilly routes. But I would
I'm
describe
just
as hilly
kidding.
routes.
Except the bluffs.
Yeah, yeah.
What?
Beller Bluffs, that's right. Yeah, coming up the hill from the bridge, yeah, right. But the point is, some routes are longer. It's farther from the start of leaving the yard to get to the first.
I mean, we're only going to know exactly, we're going to have our best information once we get the first two that we've purchased here and running in St. Petersburg, and then we'll have a much better sense. Our sense is that there's a number of routes that could handle that, use them today, and that's only going to increase. The number of routes that can handle that is only going to increase, and it seems to be increasing fairly quickly with the battery technology.
Right. Yes, Commissioner Eggers.
Just going back to the environmental a little bit, I just want to make sure when I go back through this later that I'm looking at stuff. The one where you have the arrow on it,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's, we're either buying 24 diesels or 18 hybrids, is that?
Yeah.
And so these buying 24 diesels, the new diesels, that's the numbers that they're generating in terms of carbon dioxide, and the 18 hybrids, that's what they're generating in that box.
I'm going, I can't answer that. I gotta go check. I don't know, I gotta see what the 41 million and the 43, well, if that's only adding 18 hybrids or 24 versus I think it's linking to the spreadsheet above, so.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to understand this a lot better. And just when you start to looking at the 01 and 02, which I'm assuming this looks like about 16 vehicles that you're going to replace, you would accomplish all with the 18 hybrids plus 2 from 2003. I'm assuming that's what you do. You go back and get maybe you don't get your oldest, you get your worst performing. I don't know. So I don't know what you do when you replace these. Do you always replace the oldest one, or do you replace the biggest polluter, the highest maintenance? They may not be the same, so.
Right. I mean, it generally flows older, get replaced before newer.
Yeah.
But there are exceptions to that where a problematic bus or two from a newer fleet might get replaced before
I mean, you've looked at things here in a lot of total numbers, and sometimes, to your point, it's like good to see the marginal difference, because you can really see, it can pop a little bit more what's happening with those 24 that we're looking at versus 18 hybrids. And so now we have 18 hybrids and 6 old diesels versus the 24 diesels.
Yeah.
You know, I think that shows it doesn't get mixed up in the whole fleet numbers, because it obviously shows that all the other pollutant numbers that you have here go down with 24 diesels. The carbon dioxide's the big one that goes up.
Right, right.
And so, I'm not sure what all those other things mean, but I just like more time to look at this and be able to ask you questions. I'm in no mood to make any kind of recommendation to move forward, other than just take it as information.
I would second that.
All right, so let's, we'll get some more information and we'll revisit this
Yeah.
next month. Okay, I've got, I apologize, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I knew it would take a lot of time, and I wanted to go through this.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In the same area, we received correspondence email from Mr. Miller responding to Commissioner Scott's questions. And I wonder if Commissioner Scott has reviewed this and acknowledged the differences are as described in this email, or whether he has found exceptions to the analysis. And the reason I'm asking is, he, in a couple of times in the past, has said, well, there's more data here, we're not using the right data. Now, I think we can agree on policy and environmental on that, but the data, we should have the same set of data. So I think that's important. If that hasn't been done, maybe staff can reach out and say, does he have any problem with the data that's presented in this email?
I will do that.
Yeah.
He has not responded.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
My
Chairman.
knowledge.
Let me ask a point of order here. Mr. Scott is not here. He is the vice chair. So who's like our next in line to run the rest of this meeting? Do we
I
go
think
back
the
to our
general
former
practice is
chair?
that
or
they
do
just
we
agree
go-
on this to run the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, do we go back to our former chair, or do we use someone else?
I think you can do whatever you want.
Bill has that look to him. To run this
You
meeting.
feel comfortable with it, Bill?
I'd
little
be happy-
efficiency.
And I
this
apologize.
group isn't the problem.
I apologize for everything.
Thank you.
This isn't the challenge you mean, this group's easy.
We can turn it up a little if you like.
I do appreciate it.
Hold it back.
Okay, I apologize to everybody, and I'll see you next week.
See ya. A couple weeks.
Couple weeks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too, thank you.
So then, do we return to 3B, which is the recruiting consultants?
Yes.
And that's Mr. Miller or Mr.?
Good morning. So, members Eggers, Janssen, Schuman, Bennett, the reason for this action this morning is to replace our current contracts for professional recruiting which have expired. And over the next 5 years, this will be a real benefit to PSTA as we can really recoup savings and valuable procurement time as well as money. It'll only be used when services are needed, and at that point then we're ready to go with the various companies that we contract with. It'll also lock in, I'll add, today's pricing, which is certainly important. This is also a very key part of our succession plan, which the board approved last year, so that as we have various openings, we would be able to advertise and move on those openings. So today, I'm asking for your approval to award contracts to the following 7 companies. These would be for 3 years and 2 one-year options for a total of 5. The contracts would go to Sunshine Enterprise USA, Krauthammer and Associates, Renee Narlock and Associates, Jury Solutions, Slavin Management Consultants, KL2 Connects, and Transpro Consulting, in the amount not to exceed $300,000.
Questions? Josh?
So this is 7 different firms, up to $300,000 per firm, per year. But is the expect,
For the life of the contract.
oh, it's 300,000 over 5 years?
Correct.
Okay.
Max.
And are these 7 firms, I mean, is it envisioned that should an opening occur that the 7 firms would be used simultaneously? Or do the different firms have different expertise in different areas of recruiting?
The latter there, yes, exactly.
Okay, so depending on what position,
Correct.
like a technology firm might go this way. So we're not looking at really engaging all 7 at one
No.
time?
So one per place, pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner
And
Ed?
these 7 times the 300 or 2.1 million, is that,
It's not envisioned that we would use.
what
And we're
positions,
close.
what are the number of positions that take this kind of recruitment expertise?
Okay, I would say, right now, currently, we have an interim for our IT program. We're looking at a director to replace Deborah Woodward.
What level in the organization, or is it
Chief
all
and
levels?
director. Chief, director, and some technical positions,
Total of
less than a dozen, about a dozen.
a dozen total.
A dozen total positions, I would say.
They
about,
they get these services.
that could get these services.
And again, I don't know what the cost is per search, but that seems awfully high. That
On-
$300,000 for, you said, how many, 12?
Yeah. On average, over the last, since I've been here for 6 years, we've usually done, I would say, an average about 1 per year. And they've averaged probably $30,000.
I was gonna say 25. Okay,
$25,000 to $30,000. There's some of these firms that are national firms that they were more in the $50,000 range, and then some were, well, a couple of them were kind of surprisingly low at like 10 to 15.
So 40 times the 12 would be about 500,000. For meaning 12 positions, if we replace.
If
they
I
all
hope
got replaced.
you guys are not all retiring.
No, I'm just trying to understand 2.1 million here versus, I just multiplied it, replacing them all one time would be a low number. So why are we asking for so much?
Well, I put the 300,000 in there, just assuming the sort of worst case scenario that we would use just one firm over the next 5 years, and each of them were $60,000 recruitments. So then that would be 6 times 5, 60 times 5.
So
is
they
3.
don't do separate type of expertise, they don't have separate expertise.
If that was just the sort of conservative set the limit on any one firm. 300 times 5. 60 times 5 was. But I would imagine, that we would spread it around, and that each firm would get maybe $50,000 total of work, over the 5 years.
Seems like you'd have 300,000 total for 5 years, as opposed
Probably.
to,
Or less.
I would
as
imagine.
opposed to 2.1 million.
Right.
So
Right.
I just don't, I don't know what this does by approving this, just, it doesn't do anything other than,
It locks in the prices, it locks in their rates now, and it allows us, when a position comes open next year or whatever, it saves on procurement, because we don't have to do a whole procurement. We can send an email to all these 7 firms and say, give us a quote for replacing our whatever. It kind of just puts a stable of firms out available to us for the future. It doesn't obligate any particular amount of money.
Did you have anything?
Yes, I didn't understand quite where the 2.1 million came from. I thought the 300,000 was the total amount.
For each firm.
For each firm.
There's 7 firms.
Well, I didn't
$300,000
agree,
max.
that's not what I thought Brian said. I thought he said $50,000 to recruit per person at the max times 12.
And
That was my
individ-
argument, that we don't need that much money. He's asking for seven companies at 300,000 per. That's the 2.1 million. But we won't probably use it. It's just-
Your action or your recommended action would not be to approve any funds, any expenditure of funds under this item. That's just an upset limit that it's either gonna last for 5 years, or in some maybe not realistic situation, if they hit 300,000 in less than 5 years, they would be done. That firm would be done.
So we're not approving a budget line item here.
Correct. No, you're not.
And there is some money in our operating budget annually, so.
What do you have this year?
Probably somewhere in the range of, I think we have some in your budget, so maybe 15,000 in your budget is a general thing, just in case. So it's probably around 30,000
Okay.
in total.
So, yeah, so probably more like 30 to 50 a year
Mhm.
at most for the 5 years.
Yeah.
I was just asking why there's so much here, but I guess it really doesn't matter. We're not
Mr. Shulman?
obligating anybody.
You said the existing contracts are expiring or have expired. What was the contract amount on the existing contracts?
We had 2 companies. We had Generator and Mercer. I don't know if you have the figures there in
What did you think they were, 200?
I can't recall, but we can look it up really fast.
that. I think they were less than that. Maybe.
Okay, and
We
so,
probably, we used about 1 per year.
so the follow-up question would be, was the dollar amount for the, included in the RFP? So did we put an RFP saying it's a $300,000 contract? No.
We said there's no there's no guarantee of any.
Right,
Okay.
They all bid each time.
yes.
Yeah. Well, they put it in their contract, they put it in their proposal, this is how much it will cost us to do a
Search for X.
search. And we would lock that in. We would execute a contract, we would kind of lock them into that rate. That wouldn't change.
So if we weren't, it just seems to me if we weren't close to hitting those upper targets on the prior contract, and we don't anticipate hitting them this time around, that it would just make more sense, just to even on the appearance of keeping everything level, just to keep it the same dollar amount that we had before, as opposed to looking like it's an increase in procurement costs.
We could do that. I mean, quite frankly, with the vendors in the RFP, there was no dollar amount guaranteed. So they're looking at this as a 5-year contract. What I thought, just putting the 300K in there, was really for the board to feel like, well, we're not going to just use one, and maybe it gives the vendors some sense of comfort that the work's going to be spread amongst the many. But maybe.
But the optics to residents sometimes can be like, the
Yeah.
things we're asking right now.
Yeah.
2.1 million. It's
We're,
like, yeah.
we're the committee making a recommendation to the board. So does the committee want to anticipate the board reacting in a similar manner? And would Mr. Miller have a suggestion to?
I think Debbie has a number for us.
Debbie?
Here, it's, the last contract for each firm was $200,000.
Okay.
We could put 200.
I would make a motion to move ahead with this at the 200,000 level and just keep it the same as it was before, and we're just changing vendors.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, second?
All right, are there other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the amended motion? And would that be consent or action for the board?
Yes.
I would say consent.
I could go with consent. I think if somebody can pull it out, but
All right.
I'm good. We'll try it.
Since we're not actually spending.
So it'd be
No, we're not spending anything.
200,000 per firm And this would be a recommendation to go on the consent item for the board.
And I think it's important, what you just said earlier too, is
To
as
note.
an example, this coming year in our budget, we have
Right.
$30,000.
Yeah.
Which kind of puts it all in perspective, really, what we're planning to do.
And to note that it's the same dollar amount that was in the prior contract,
Yeah,
which makes it
that's, yeah.
less to
We'll
add.
put those numbers in the revised.
Okay, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Transit Asset Management Plan Consultant. Henry or Debbie?
I'll take this one. Good morning. So at your places is an action item to recommend approval of a contract with Gannett Fleming to assist PSTA with developing and submitting its transit asset management plan. So what is transit asset management? Basically, it's a business model that uses the condition of assets, our assets, to guide the optimal prioritization of funding in order to keep those assets in a state of good repair. So what assets are we talking about? Essentially, it's 4 areas of focus. It's rolling stock, those are our buses, equipment, facilities, and infrastructure. So for the past little over 7 or 8 years, the Federal Transit Administration, along with transit agencies, have been working to improve the understanding and practice of transit asset management. In 2010, the FTA conducted an assessment on the national state of good repair as a whole and found that there's an estimated $50 to $80 billion in deferred maintenance and replacement needs that are needed. Now, the vast majority of that number I gave you has to deal with rail operations, but the feds have found that this is now a extreme critical area of focus and a national focus at that, so much that in the previous and current transportation funding legislation, MAP 21, and also the FAST Act, that it has now become a requirement that all FTA-funded transit agencies, such as PSTA, must complete a transit asset management plan, which will be due later 2018. It's also a living document that must be updated subsequently each year moving forward. Before me is not the legislation, but a guide. This is the guide to fill up to do a transit asset management plan. I have read this. The actual legislation is much bigger. If I could take a moment talking about how we sourced the consultant that we're recommending approval is, this is another example of how we collaborated with our colleagues across the Bay, HART. We spoke with HART. They also have to complete a transit asset management plan, and seeing that we both had similar objectives to complete, that it made sense that we would collaborate to issue an RFP to hire a consultant for each of our needs. HART did spearhead and lead the procurement process, and by us combining our needs and our resources, it has resulted in cost savings with this consultant. I won't go through all the particulars of the procurement process. It's there in the action items. I would like to say that HART's team did an excellent job with conducting the procurement process. PSTA had 2 members as part of the evaluation team. All said and done, Gannett Fleming was scored the highest proposal or proposer. A similar action item was taken to HART's Finance and Audit Committee on October 16th, and also their Board of Directors meeting on November 6th to award a contract to Gannett Fleming for a total not to exceed $316,000. Our portion of the project, which is what our transit asset management plan would entail, would not exceed $210,000. The reason why ours is a little bit less is because we've actually done some of the front work, and our needs are a little bit less than Hart's at this point. This project will be 100% federally funded by an FTA grant, and that is included in our capital improvement program.
Questions, Commissioner Eggers?
And that, when you said Gannett Fleming was the highest, it's in qualifications.
Qualifications.
Yeah, but not money. So we wouldn't go typically with the highest in money. I just want to make sure that everybody was listening. And then the process that we're going through, I mean, this is kind of to give the federal government a state of our assets. Is that the condition? And I'm assuming, and again, you know, some of the things that we talked about earlier that you've been doing with our fleet to extend that, I'm assuming that improved picture is what's being reflected with our federal government when we talk about the condition of our assets. Because that certainly is, I mean, to me, that's something that, I mean, you said, I think you were saying is we're one of the few that have really gotten to that point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's significant. I mean, when the federal government's trying to get a status of the assets of our buses especially, to extending lives and of the buses themselves. I don't know how that gets reflected in an asset study like this, but I think that's significant. It should be passed along. And so others can do the same and save more money while still getting more money but saving more money. Anyway,
I mean, at
something to be proud of.
one level, this is obviously going to be all the transit systems across the country.
Right.
The numbers that they put together and their shortfall, et cetera, are going to be compiled to ultimately give Congress yet another number of shortfall in infrastructure spending. But then, yeah, no doubt, the idea is that each agency is supposed to have a plan that does contain keys to maintaining the assets it has, and hopefully getting that word out about what we've been able to do with our innovations within the maintenance effort is a whole part of that. Yeah.
Well, I hope that we are lauded for it and not penalized for that good effort.
Are there other questions?
You know, the others should be doing what we're doing is what I'm saying, not.
Should be.
It's all, I'm not trying to make positive comments about what we're doing, not negative at all. This is good stuff.
Is there a motion to, on this item?
Second.
And is that for consent?
Yes.
Without further comments or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next item is the monthly financial statement.
Thank you very much. We have hit the end of our fiscal year that we're reporting out, and on the first page of this is the month-to-date for September. And in September, we had a budget of $3.8 million deficit with a actual deficit of $4.1 million for almost an 8% variance with $304,000. On the revenue side, as a whole, we were under budget $81,000. Driving that is the passenger fares, and that was $288,000 under budget. Part of that is usually in September, and we never know when it happens. Our partners like at AMSCOT and CVS place orders. They did not do so this September, but they did so in October. So that makes up part of that deficit. And to your point, Commissioner Eggers, Brad and I have had discussions on, the success of pricing passes. I told Brad I was actually approached from somebody from Stanford that I'm going to be having, last week I couldn't do it because I couldn't talk, but have another conversation with. They're doing a whole study on the effect of knowing when it's like Christmas is coming. And the anticipation is what releases the dopamine effect, as they call it. And I said, how can we apply this into transit? It's not actually the present after Christmas, it's the anticipation of Christmas. So how can I apply that into the transit? And they were trying to figure out how to use it in government. And I'm trying to think, how can we use it in marketing and looking at our passes? Is it the kind of thing when you go to the window, you never know whether you're going to pay full price, 10% off, free pass, half price pass? So I'm going to be having some other conversations with them because I thought it was quite interesting to see how we can apply it to help increase sales and also make it kind of a fun event. Or do we run specials? You know, periodically we've got Black Friday coming up. Do we run a special then? You know, kind of a thing. Because it was quite successful what Brad had come up with.
Yeah, can I just comment on that? And I don't know how marketing and economic models work on the economy versus how they are treated on bus services. But to me, it is crystal clear that we have a commodity product. It is, and when I say commodity, it's not a value-added product. It is just a bus service out there doing its thing. It's not a premium service. It is just, and so that is very price sensitive.
Yeah.
Period. So if you drop that price half, you're gonna, hopefully, I mean, we've got, in theory, lots of empty seats out there that we can really increase ridership. That's to your point. I'd just like to hear more about how that relates to this, because I think, and even when you, in that area that you were showing us, that in some areas, actually ridership's gone up a little bit, but in the one area, it's really gone down. I think that's even the more price-sensitive area. And so I would argue that with those extra special premiums or things that really people, that to me makes sense where you price it a little bit. Otherwise, I'd be looking really hard at no longer having a $70 monthly pass, and getting people on board the buses. And again, anyway.
I did not pay him to say that.
I was going to say, yeah.
And the other thing I had a question on is on that table on the top up there on the September.
Yes.
When you have the expenses, I think that should be in red also, shouldn't it? It went.
Expenses were, I have it in black and white, I apologize.
Yeah, it went from the budget of 5.5 to actual 5.7.
Which was over budget by the 200.
So it should be in red also, getting the total of 304 in red. It went red and then it went black and then red.
Okay.
Should all be red.
It should be a negative number, not a
Yeah.
positive number.
Okay, you're correct.
So just,
Looking at the
no
color.
big deal, just change the color.
And Debbie, if because Commissioner Eggers brought it up, I've been in favor of, and would still be in favor of, a revenue study that looks at how we generate revenue, including things like lowering passes, family passes. In my one-on-ones, we've talked about how a family of 4 or 5, it's actually cheaper to take a taxi,
Yeah.
or it's cheaper to take an Uber. Things like tourist packages, coupled with city passes for, art attractions, where tourists can be buying these things in advance. They may never even use it, but part of that endorphin effect, and I just experienced it myself because I'm going to Atlanta next week, is everything's already paid for. I'm ready to go. I don't know how much I'm actually going to use MARTA or some of the other systems, but I already paid for it. It's part of the deal. And so I think that there's definitely some room, and we saw that with the sample, to move that forward. And I think that could drive those revenues higher.
Well said. Revenue study, I think, is important.
Revenue/behavior study would probably be the best way to put it.
Behavioral economics. For the month, as you mentioned, our expenses were over budget, our salaries were up for the month. Those fluctuate sometimes when we have classes, and then it comes back down. And if you turn the page, you can see where we are on a year-to-date basis, which is an excellent standing. At this point during the year, we anticipate to have everything in with the exception of 3 items. And those 3 items is we have 2 actuarial studies. One that handles the liabilities that come through risk, workers' comp and general liability. It's an actuarial study, and one on our post-employment benefit obligations. So those 2 we will have probably within a few weeks. And the other one, which has been delayed for the last couple of years, is the state of Florida pension. Hopefully this year it won't be as delayed as it was last year. I think it came in at the 11th hour in March, maybe. And that footnote goes for at least 9 pages, so, you know, that puts the crunch on us. So other than that, as we look at this for the year, for the full year to date, we had anticipated being able to put back into our reserves $599,845. We're looking right now at a little over $1 million will go in. So it was very favorable, $489,000. So that money we will put into our capital reserves going forward. And I have to thank the staff, because we only report out the numbers. It's the staff that does a lot of holding open positions, finding ways of saving money, doing things differently to be able to make that happen. And we really took a look at it. As you notice, the passenger fares, as we've talked about all year, were down. So staff compensated for that. And so we're ending the year on a very good note. Yes, sir.
And not just this, the red and the black and all of that. I always think of things that are in the black as good and things that are in the red is not good. So again, the tables there seem to not add up if you do all the reds and blacks.
Okay, we'll make sure.
So
that
I don't know how you guys are doing it down below. You say you're under budget, so you put it in red on the details. So I don't know, again, no big deal. I just think at the top, if the variances are the one should be in the red, the second one should be in the black, so that you have a.
Those are conditional formatting, so we can change that. Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll change how it's formatted.
I don't want to change things if it's not supposed to be.
No, it's.
If it's incorrect, I don't know how you guys know.
No, we can change whatever.
Okay. Thank you.
It's easy to do.
All of them have to be ethical.
Other questions on the financial report? We have a couple other items to cover, so I'm sort of moving us along. Quarterly reports.
Are at your places for the there's a number of quarterly reports that are in your packet that we produce to you every quarter. Interesting. And then the ridership report is at your places for the month of October.
Okay.
We've seen the now the complete ending of the Clearwater Jolly Trolley service that services the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. They no longer have that service, and that is the reason for the dramatic drop in Jolly Trolley ridership compared to a year ago. It's just that aquarium service no longer be there. But I got an email late on Friday that our revenues were looking better in October.
Yes, they were.
So we'll see that next month.
Future meeting subjects?
September, you mean?
For
Compared-
October.
Compared to
revenues
budget
were-
even.
Oh, compared to budget even?
Yeah,
Because
a little bit. I'm stealing Debbie's next finance committee thunder by saying that, sorry.
It's okay. This is worth repeating again next month.
Okay. Future meeting subjects?
I think we'll be
They were
discussing
listed.
the savings a little bit further. Hopefully get some estimates by your next meeting. And maybe some environmental
work, yeah.
breakdown of that too complex spreadsheet.
Modern transit campaign?
Yes, I'm excited to introduce Cindy. To give the Finance Committee a little precursor of what you'll see more fleshed out at the board meeting after Thanksgiving.
Good morning.
Hi there.
I'm Cindy Raskin-Schmidt, your Director of Communications and Marketing, and this is Elisa DiBernardo, our Account Manager from FKQ Advertising. We are here this morning to give you an update about our Modern Transit campaign. So as you know, one of our roles here is to talk to 2 different groups of customers, not only the riders who use our service, but also to the taxpayers who help pay for it. So one of our performance metrics on the scorecard that you all approved is a community sentiment survey to find out how the general public feels about PSTA. So earlier this year, you all approved for us to move forward with an advertising campaign targeted to those non-riders so that we can attempt to tell the public about the services that we provide and perhaps even convert some of those non-riders into riders once they see about all the fabulous, innovative, and creative services that we have to offer. So at this point, I'm very excited to share with you the progress we're making on this campaign. As I said, it'll be targeted to non-riders. The purpose is to build awareness about PSTA's name and basic level of services that we provide. The campaign will include cable TV ads, social media, and also some bus advertising. This is in the budget for this year. The post-production and the media is in the current year's budget, and some of the pre-production we were able to cover in last year's budget. So without further ado, I just want to give you a quick glimpse of the storyline. You're going to see the actual full commercial at your December board meeting, and I'm so excited for you all to see the finished product. Everybody is going to love it. Are we working here? Nope, turn it on. There we go. So in the first scene, we have some real human beings getting on an actual bus. Some of these people you might recognize. This is Eric. He's in our procurement department. He was super excited to get to be in the commercial. And this is Rosalind at the front desk. So the scene opens with passengers getting on the bus, and you see some people getting off the bus. And then they're going to pay their fare. And then you're going to see the bus driving past this mural. This is 1st Avenue North and 6th, I think it's 6th Street. This is a mural by Ricky Watts. It was created as part of the Shine event a couple of years ago. And we've been working with Mr. Watts to get his permission to use this piece of art in our ad and on some of our collateral pieces. So you're going to see the bus driving past here. As the bus drives past, you're going to start to see the mural peel off the wall and attach itself to our bus. The bus at this point is going to be driving into a virtual animated world. Once it's in the animated world with the animated road, we'll be sharing some of our innovative services. So the voiceover, I don't have the whole script because I don't want to spoil it, but it starts off, the story is, when is a bus more than just a bus? When it's an innovator, when it's a trailblazer, when it's a Wi-Fi hotspot. So we're going to go through some of these partnerships and innovative services, and you'll see their words that describe the services swirl around the bus as it drives down the street. And then at the last scene, we'll show all of those services. I don't have that slide in here. And then we'll have our call to action, which is to learn more, to go to PSTA.net and learn about the innovative services in modern transit that PSTA has to offer. So that's the summary of the story that you're going to get to see in a couple of weeks, right after Thanksgiving. If anybody has questions, Elisa and I are happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
Just one at the last, it says go to PSTA.net. Are we going to include things like the PSTA Facebook, download the app, other ways of connecting with PSTA than just through the website?
Well, because this is the very last screen and there's limited to 30 seconds in the commercial, when they go to the website, the very first thing they'll see when they go to our website is going to be a banner that matches the artwork, and then they'll be able to go there and find all the different ways to connect.
So it's kind of taking them into like a landing page, a similar page that then they can find all the other information that we're referring to in the spot. So if those downloads are important, then it's certainly something we can make easily navigable to.
It just occurs to me that not everyone, even though, obviously the website's the most logical place to go, other people may be more apt to go to an app or redirected to a place that they're more familiar, more comfortable, more mobile friendly, those sorts of things. So just whether the logo or the iStore, the Apple Store, the Play Store are included on the screen, so people know that those sorts of things exist.
Right. Well, I think on this screen we probably could add like the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to connect by social. But really, we want them to go to PSTA.net because that's where they're going to learn about those innovative services.
And I absolutely agree. I just don't want to lose the 5% of people that are going to go, well, I don't want to go to the website and search around.
Right.
I'd rather just do what I do with everything else.
Right.
So.
Understood.
Awesome.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Love the choice of artwork from St. Pete. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Well squared, St. Petersburg.
Is there other business for the committee?
Can I just ask one thing on the?
Absolutely.
It is on the calendar for January 18th. as the next meeting, but that is a Thursday. I just want to make sure that,
Yes, if you recall.
I don't,
we had
that's
to-
fine.
We had to make a switch to that due to a conflict.
And that's perfect. I checked like the official posted calendar, it was January 18th. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
January,
That's switch.
January 18th.
That's nice for finance.
Because, I'll be in Tallahassee. Some PSTA.
We had to do it from Wednesday because it was a conflict.
They moved from Wednesday the 17th to Thursday the 18th.
Because we had a conflict on the 17th.
Yeah.
I have a conflict on the 18th, so I'll
Okay.
I have one of those annual things that I made a year ago. Unless I can get a switch, I'll try to get a switch.
Now, the planning committee does not meet that week, according to my schedule.
Planning committee.
It'll be Thursday next month.
I don't know, I'm finding how many meetings.
What'd you say?
I'm just observing on my calendar that I have the finance committee on the 18th. I do not have the planning committee that week.
It's on there.
Moved to the 18th.
It
Same
should be on the
times.
18th. Okay.
I apologize for the controversy.
They're both on the 18th.
Okay,
Great job.
all right.
You did a good job. You've done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. For this group, probably.
Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Hey, morning, Sam. How are you? He's 5 miles.
Thanks.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Right.
21 miles.
No, I wasn't.
He's so big.